Da, da, da. That's a tasty beverage. Hi, friends. Welcome to the show. My name is Dean, and we got a fun one for you today. We've got Game 3, Stanley Cup Final. Oilers at it, down 0-2. We'll get to some prop bets because, listen, if you're going to lose to the Stanley Cup Final, you might as well make a little bit of money. We'll have some fun with that. We're also going to talk a little bit about Trump today. We're going to talk about men's health today, and we're going to do it all with a new guest. Speaking of guests and co-hosts, please welcome back to the program my friend and yours, Mr. Lachlan Cross. Lachlan, good morning, good evening,
good morning.
Afternoon. Before we do anything, before we get to our guests, before we get into the Oilers Game 3, which I know you're excited. I know Deb's very excited as well. Oh, Jesus. I got it all going on today. Forgive me. I don't know what I'm doing. Before we get to, how's Deb? Because the wife takes this very, very seriously. She takes the Oilers seriously. You're down 0-2. Game at home tonight, 55% favorite. We'll get to some of that. Oilers, Panthers, you've been trucked in the first two games. How's Deb? Not you, not the city. Deb. She's indicative of the city right now. How's she feel?
She's like me. When the game's off, she can go about and live her life. Right. There are such fans that and I think the difficult part about this series for Oiler fans is they should have won that first game, right? So there's a lot of, and they actually, the first half of the second game, they looked pretty good. It's been frustrating because it's a war zone, right? So it's a tough series to watch because they're just drowning each other. But I don't think anybody's surprised by Florida's defensive strategy.
How much tougher they are, how much better their goaltending is. Like, this is where it all gets exposed. Anyway, Listen, I'm excited for you tonight. I'd be remiss to have a conversation about professional sports without having one of the most well-respected professional football players in the history of the CFL.
Unless you're in Regina.
Unless you're from Saskatchewan. Please welcome to the program, Mr. Troy Westwood, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing, Troy? Nice to see you. Good to see you. Nice to be back. All right. How are you?
I've been in parades, brought to Saskatchewan in parades, waving on floats with banjo players. They love me in Saskatchewan.
Well,
waving like the Queen voice.
I would question that. Let's dig a little deeper into that, Troy. Let's just say you set up a lemonade stand before a game outside of Mosaic Stadium
in Regina,
and you wore your old Blue Bombers jersey. How much lemonade are you selling?
No shoulder pads either, or helmet.
I think more than 50%,
wear the helmet with the bar.
More than 50% would embrace and love me, man. That's been my I'm telling you.
Do people know that you you came up with the term Banjo Bowl?
Oh yeah, that's the one thing folks would know out there.
Yeah,
that's the guy responsible for the game and the term. Even there's a lot of people there that still maybe don't appreciate the term of Banjo Bowl. Somehow they feel offended, even though the Bombers are equally a part of that. So I'll never understand that. But yeah, that's the one thing for sure that's got sort of a stamp on it.
Yeah. For people that don't know Troy Westwood is a legendary kicker for the Blue Bombers. He holds several records, all-time records for points, et cetera, et cetera. He is not only a legend in Winnipeg and in Manitoba. He and Lachlan started working together when he pivoted from professional sports to broadcasting, so we got a connection there. And then, of course, the thing that made you famous, other than your incredible 18-year CFL career, the thing that made you famous was when, and if I'm not mistaken, I just want to get the language right just to make sure I have it here, how you called Saskatchewan Rough Rider football fans, and I'm just quoting, Banjo Pickin Inbreds?
That is correct.
Then when that was done, You were forced to issue an apology, and let me just read this apology to see if I can get this correct. Did you follow up with this, Troy? Quote, and he didn't think anyone in Saskatchewan could actually play the banjo. Is that correct?
I apologize for calling them Banjo Pickin Inbreds, and then said the vast majority of people in Saskatchewan have no clue how to play the banjo.
All of this is probably true, right? Like, so you can't be faulted for dishonesty. Yeah. I always loved Troy, man. He never minced words. We used to have him on when I was in Winnipeg, and I remember pushing to have you know, on for on a regular slot. I don't know if you remember that. It was 100 years ago, but the least surprising thing about Troy Westwood and his career, in my opinion, is the fact that you pivoted into broadcasting and had a wildly successful career behind the mic. So,
well, especially because you could have got canceled for the Banjo Pickin Inbred thing, and then you doubled down on the Banjo Pickin Inbred thing, and then it became literally known as, which is incredible. Thanks to you, it became known as, when the Rough Riders and the Bombers play each other, they're like, you know what, embrace it. It's a CFL. It's a lot of fun. Let's just call it the Banjo Bowl. Are you surprised they left Pickin Inbred out of that title too, or are you just happy they settled on Banjo Bowl? Like, how do you feel about that?
I was fine and dandy with that, and that was pre-canceling days.
Yeah,
Dean. So yeah, I couldn't really get canceled back then prior to it happening. But at first, it was actually, I know Brian Williams, on CBC refused to talk about the malicious comment that I made in pregame before. Yeah, so some folks actually took it literally. Right. Yeah. And to those, I even apologize to those folks that actually had a brother and a sister that were parents somehow related and stuff. But my mom was from Saskatchewan, man. So going back and forth my whole life, it's just been vicious verbal barbs back and forth, and I was just having fun with the folks.
Do you remember that though? Remember when you could just kind of joke around? And you know what? I know what you were doing. This is back in the, this is 20 years ago. This is back when you could kind of joke around, and it was like fight night, right? Like your team would appreciate it. The PR was great. This is pre-PR being a strategy and a tactic the way it's used now. But do you remember when you could freely say those things to a reporter? Do you remember that? Do you remember how cool that was?
I think you can still do that, man. You just got to be clever and understand where the lines are and tiptoe on them.
Yeah, I agree with Troy. I think that's a really good point. I think we overthink this cancellation thing. It's there. Cancel culture is a thing, but the guys that get canceled generally deserve it, right? Like, generally. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule, but they went way too far, right? Mm-hmm. I still think, and the thing is, the nomenclature over the years has just changed. It's shifted. I remember back in the day, you couldn't say some of the things that we say now on the radio, right? Like, you would have gotten in major trouble if you would have said cock on the air, right? So it's just a matter of I don't know. It's just a shift in how society views things, and you kind of got to keep up with it. I think podcasting has really loosened up, if we're being honest, has loosened up everybody's idea of what's right and wrong.
Well, there's no regulation on podcasts. I think you'd still get in trouble for saying the word you said on air, brother. Right?
Well, yes, but I think
that's different. The accountability isn't like a penalized
word.
Yeah, but that accountability is a little bit different. But you're born in 67, Troy. So what are you approaching 60? Is that correct? What are you, 57? Yeah. You're around 57. Yes, by the way, you still look like you could beat the shit out of me at 57, even though we're close to the same age. But you played in a time in the CFL back when, and we're of that age now where we can look back on our industry and radio or media and go, oh, I remember when, right? You're at that age now where you're looking at the CFL and you're looking at other athletes get into trouble for the shit that they say. And you made a comment the other day, which I thought was really cool about on Twitter. And I thought it was great. You and I think, share similar values when it comes to, what it is that we advocate for and against. And you're way into the conspiracy theorists, getting after them, Trumpism, MAGA, MapleMaga. But I noticed that you took a shot at Theo Fleury the other day about chemtrails, and I thought it was really funny. And then I thought to myself, I wonder what a guy like Troy, Westwood, who's a legendary athlete. He's got a tremendous reputation. You're an advocate. You are a community builder, but you were in the limelight playing professional sports at the same time that Theo Fleury was, and I'm sure that you've crossed paths with him at some point, being from Manitoba. But I've never talked to another athlete, because athletes are real quiet right now, right? They're trying to survey the cultural situation. Watching Aaron Rodgers go out on a limb has been very interesting. But watching people like Theo, who and knowing that athletes like you have this mantle and reputation that they carry with you post-career, I'd love your thoughts on people like him, people like Jamie, that have been no issue advocating for conspiratorial shit. And it's not even the political stuff. Like listening to a guy like Theo Fleury, if you're you and you have a relationship with you, what are your thoughts like when you consider Theo today? Oh, is he there? Did we just lose him? Yeah, there he is. There we go, Troy.
Sure, boys. I heard that all.
Okay. Yeah, just your thoughts. Theo Fleury, like, you're an athlete post-career. You can say whatever you want. He does too.
Yeah. Hey, man.
Different
yeah.
tenors.
I think of deep end and off the deep end, and I think Theo is firmly entrenched in that, along with Jamie Saleh, however you say her name. Like, those folks, I don't understand. And a lot of it, whether it's politically or science-based, I don't know what has happened with current day scientific understandings and the lack of trust and things of that nature. And of course, it goes back to COVID and and things, and like not trusting science. And I like, it's just the whole, boys, what I think it is, or somehow related to, for the first time in human history, since with the internet coming in and being accessible, we have all this. It's no longer a book of encyclopedias in front of us that you got to read and study and all that sort of crap, right? You have all the information available to you in nanoseconds now. But somehow, to me, instead of becoming more informed and better informed, somehow the disinformation and the conspiracy world is overwhelming everything. And we see certain social media platforms that are unregulated, that I think is outrageous. And people jump all over me for freedom of speech and things of that nature. I'm a huge proponent of freedom of speech. And even though our understanding and interpretation of that in Canada is different from America, I just think it's reckless. And I think it's very obvious how reckless it is, the Pandora box that's been opened to allow people to say anything they want in the element of disinformation, and it just spreads like wildfire. It's more dangerous than the airline industry being unregulated. When you're thinking about danger, anything around us that poses a threat to society or a dangerous element to society is regulated. And why social media is not, I think, has been a colossal downfall or error that has been made. And I don't know how you stuff all that back into the box, but we live in this incredible era of disinformation, and places like Fox News and things like that riding that hard. I don't know how you manage that, how you reel it in. And to me, individuals like Theo Fleury and that Jamie Saleh, or however I don't know how to say her name.
Yeah, you nailed it, Saleh. Yeah.
How they're a part, they are a part of that. And I there's certain sadness to me when I watch it, and they're saying things to me that I don't in any way whatsoever understand or believe in. And I say it's just far away. And I like, when Theo's saying dictator this and communist that, and I'm like, dude, like, do you understand how far away we are from that? And I see Lachlan's hat and stuff like that. And just like the element of anger and hatred towards certain things in this great country of ours, it's exhausting. And I don't know how, whatever the barriers that were broken down in the era of Trump there, 2015 going forward, I don't know how we get back to some level of communication and decency and thought, man. It's just, we live in crazy wild times.
You kind of pulled on something, Troy, there, and I know that I know this isn't it's not an easy discussion, it's not an easy solution, but the attention piece that you sort of glanced on there quickly is I think is something that we don't dig into enough. I think a lot of the issues we're dealing with, especially when you're dealing with like a Theo and a Jamie Soleil, is they found a family, they found a camp, they found a group, and that group was already on the edge of skepticism when it came to, just about anything. So it wasn't hard to pull them over into the deep end of the pool and go, come over here, the water's nice. And then when they get over there, they got this group that like, get in here, everybody, you crazy.
We all
guy,
believe the
Theo.
Same crazy shit.
Yeah,
Let's
and
get in
so
here.
I think
it's okay.
So again, like we keep touching on these themes on the podcast, and again, I think the overarching thing, I mean, all of it plays into it, like the cult aspect, the I need attention aspect, the social media stuff. I think it was a bunch of things led to this division, and what I keep thinking is like our role. And not that this is an easy path out, but our role, if you can play the middle and kind of and encourage a conversation, which Dean is trying to do right now, as opposed to fighting about it all the time, might actually pull us a little bit back to some sense of normalcy. Is that fair to say?
I wonder about that, boys. And so if we can take what you're talking about, Locke, and sort of bring it to a specific issue to discuss. And when we talk about trying to reconnect, trying to find common ground.
Yeah.
When I think about the situation with Donald Trump, and since 2015, I've been sounding the alarm. Coming out in 87, I read Art of the Deal, and he was someone I always looked up to and followed. I've actively followed him as much as you could back then. And then my sister moves to New York in the early 90s, and it just sort of continues the whole thing. And I'm following him all through those decades, and warning people, and as the whole political thing's unfolding. And now, like right now, and I had plenty of friends that were like, hey, give him a chance. And I'm like, no, and arguing, debating that, and they've come over across the line since then. But now individuals that are in that Trump space, the MapleMaga or MAGA, if you are still with someone of the nature of Donald Trump, who is clearly representing an authoritarian state, when we all decide to live in a democratic state, we can have a discussion all standing within the foundation of democracy, right? Mm-hmm. We can discuss tax rates. We can discuss how involved government should be. All the things traditionally that we would discuss and debate from a political standpoint. But when we have a group of individuals who are now representing and expressing the desire to live in an authoritarian or dictator type state, how do you connect with those people? Growing up when I did in my era, right, coming out of having grandparents who took part in World War II, and the lessons forever taught to us from those grandparents, teachers, it was an everyday lesson of things World War II and right, the Cold War era with Russia was this omnipotent enemy. And we used to, now kids they go through school shooting drills. We used to hide under desks in case there was a nuclear attack from Russia, mm-hmm. right? And democracy, all the elders and the older people that came out of that would always warn us how precious and delicate democracy was, how you had to stay on top of it and make sure that you protected it. And that was lost on me a little bit as a youngster. But at this point in time, man, I sure do see that. But if someone's questioning democracy, I feel like grabbing a bat and locking the room, like discussion. I feel like going to war and bashing somebody's skull in. That's honestly how I feel if someone's talking about taking away democracy. And I know that we're not there in Canada. I don't think anywhere near where they're at right now in America. And I honestly believe that we're too culturally diverse and considerably different from a fanatical standpoint from America with the evangelicals and all that. Like America, ever since I was a kid, there's always a certain level of fanaticism that's existed in the States that I didn't think we have in Canada, right? And you see it all the time in sports and things of that nature. But right now, what's happening in America, I went to school for 4 years in South Dakota, and we would have these large political classes, and there'd be great debate back and forth with that and religion and things of that nature. I can't imagine being in college right now and you're debating Trump followers and things, MAGA, and you're no longer debating within the arena of democracy. Now you're actually debating democracy versus authoritarian rule or dictator. Like, it's just amazing where, and like what you guys were talking about, the individuals such as Theo and Jamie and everyone else that's sort of in that group, or possibly wearing a hat like Locke is right now, right? That are just really dispossessed.
I love this hat. Really
angry and upset. Like, I don't know how we're this, and we're nowhere near the end, right, boys? This is like ongoing. And one of the early things to remind people of is that Trump, all he represents, he's a symptom. He's not the disease. There's a much larger disease in America that we're seeing that is like all of the sycophants and the follower of his. When Trump dies, that whole everything that has that is moved forward, that he's brought and helped carry forward, it's still going to exist in America. There is a serious ongoing threat and problem in America as it relates to those who are done with democracy, are so dispossessed and not happy that they want some sort of remarkable change. And there's a group of that exists in Canada too, that we all know. And where is that going?
I have to believe there's a bit of a separation between the two, though. Like I
agree,
need to go to bed that way.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think we're fundamentally different, but it's still there. I think, if you go look at some of the things in Alberta, some of the grassroots things, and, I think the concern is there in Canada as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, like with Parker and TBA, UCP,
exactly.
That kind of stuff. Yeah, you've been really outspoken about
the
David
Christian
Harker.
And the whole Christian nationalist sort of a thing. And it's right. There's nothing. They don't have the percentage from a number standpoint in Canada, I don't think, to be as impactful to make such a dramatic shift to things here. But if America were to fall that way, boys, in the upcoming November election, we are always so influenced, right? People in the early stages with me on social media would be like, what are you saying this all about Trump? What does that has nothing to do with us here in Canada? Come on, man. Right? We are always heavily influenced by everything that happens.
But it's the same kind of person too, right, Troy? Like, we talked about that briefly on the podcast this last week, and Lachlan's a much nicer person than me. So when I talk about cognitive dissonance, which is a nice way of saying stupid people, right? Or people that have low IQs, which is always borne out by people like the guys at Good Liars. And you've seen lots of different vignettes. You tweeted this the other day to prove your point. I mean, this is just one of the symptoms, right? You've got people who are uneducated, people who are angry, people who believe in fairy tales. And I want to get to the Christian nationalist stuff in just a second too. But to your point, videos like this are generally what Lachlan and I and you in the radio business would call bits. Like, oh, this can't be real. But this is very real. This is the average Trump voter that goes to a Trump rally and literally believes the earth's still flat. Like, literally believes it.
Is the earth round or flat?
The earth's flat.
Do you think the earth is round or flat?
I know we didn't go to the moon.
We didn't go to the moon?
No, we didn't go to the moon.
Why do you say that?
Because you can't get out of the atmosphere.
Round or flat?
I'm not really sure.
You're not sure? Could be flat?
Could be.
Earth round or flat?
Well, you know the answer to that. Can you tell me what you think?
Please answer me, please.
No, because I want to know. Tell me. Cause,
I believe the earth is round.
From NASA pictures, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you know of CGI, right?
I've heard of CGI, yeah.
Yeah. So I believe in the Bible, in Genesis, under the dome. It plainly tells you there, under a firmament, dome. So it's, as flat as a...
There you go. Flat as a pancake, or as flat as a pancake. I mean, stupidity is one of those reasons, Troy, and we all know what those reasons are. Obviously, you've got business that factors into it, religion that factors into it. But I see you on Twitter, Mr. Westwood, from time to time, repeating a lot of the things that I hold to be true, which is, hey, be very careful because these people are extremists in as much as the Taliban and ISIS are extremists and misrepresent the Muslims, the Christian nationalist movement. And you like to have that. You like to make sure people know that, hey, there's extremists in the Christian movement as well. And you're very kind to that faith when you actually kind of chop it up and say, no, that is a misrepresentation of what Christians believe. But take me on that journey in your mind. What do you see? What is your frustration?
Yeah, in that video we just watched, boys, you think there's just maybe a few of those, but there appears to be tens of millions of those types of individuals in that sort of scale of thinking in the States for sure, and just amongst us in society in a general sense. But where I went to, again, I'll reference my school years, or my university years, boys. I was the only non-Christian on campus at a Lutheran college in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I had to take 2 religious classes because it was an art school. And so it was literally me versus the entirety of the campus every time. And still to this day, the professors reference my being there as a non-Christian, and where everybody else was Christian. So I've and back.
Is that Augustana University? You went to Augustana University?
Yeah.
It was a Christian university, Christian Lutheran University. Is that correct? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they let you in as a non-believer, dude.
Well, yeah. And I mean, that's a whole nother thing to talk about. My roommate in college ended up going to get his doctorate in theology. And unquestionably, it was because we would argue and debate perpetually. But when you're looking, like, specifically right now with the whole Christian movement, and especially, again, I'll go back to the States here, the separation of church and state, how back when I was in college, I had an 8x10 signed of George Bush, an 8x10 of Ronald Reagan, very conservative in thought. I think right now, if you were to ask those who identify with being on the right, I would bet 20% of those individuals in Canada or the States couldn't even give you an accurate definition of a traditional conservative understanding, right? Which would be small government, not involved in things, right? Whatever's going on in a bedroom somewhere is none of my business, right? Something like back when I was in college in the late 80s there, right? Something like abortion wasn't, it was a choice was considered, that was paramount, right? Choice, not getting involved, not having the government involved. And now what we're seeing in America is this surge. To me, boys, this is, I think we're witnessing on this soil in North America with Canada and the state, sort of a last gasp of Christian belief and the evangelicals. This is their last gasp at power, because
I've brought that up.
In a demographic state, they're losing the numbers, right? So they're in this desperate ploy of really trying to grab the system back that they once had more control of.
Exactly. And
right?
so they're really pushing hard into the sort of the political side of things. I will say this too, because I learned something years ago when the Flat Earth Conference came to town. And I've told this story before. And so this may be new to you, Troy. I know you do listen to this podcast occasionally, so you may have heard it, but it's worth mentioning again. So we thought we would be funny. We dressed up the little person on the show as a globe. We put him in a globe costume. We, got the arts and crafts out. And I was just looking for a picture on my phone. It was really funny. And we put this thing around him, and we bought tickets to the Flat Earth Conference. Now, we couldn't buy single day passes. It was a weekend thing, and it started on the Thursday and it went right through till the Sunday. And the weekend passes were something like, they were a couple $100. So to get the 3 of us in there, it was over $1,000. And when I went to my boss to get the money to buy the tickets, she said, no way in hell. And I said, well, this is too good of a bit. We're dressing up Jimmy as the globe, and we're going to the Flat Earth Conference. You got to let us go. She said, no, you can't. I'm not paying that kind of money for a bit. And so we went on air and we started a GoFundMe. Actually, you know what? No, we collected bottles. I forgot. We collected empties, and people came to the radio station, dropped off bags, to the point where we made over $1,200 to buy the weekend passes. And when we went, we got a lot of really dirty looks, but there was a handful of people that pulled us over and thought it was hilarious. Got to speak with the one guy after the fact, and he actually divulged something that I had no idea. He said, "Listen, this is a money thing." And I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, "We make a ton of money with these conferences. We do them 3 or 4 times a year.
Oh, yeah.
We travel around North America.
Yeah.
And we make bank. So
Wow.
your being here is advertising for us." And they wanted us to do bits with them on video for other conferences. Like they were going to North Carolina, and they were doing they were trying to get us involved to help them promote it from a fun perspective, but and they admitted freely to me. I should have kept some of my correspondence with that guy, because I was like, oh, okay. He's like, "I don't believe the earth is flat." He said, "But man, I'm paying for my summer home."
And there's it's a sad tragedy for society, right? Like that's a little snippet of disinformation that's not reaching the masses, like let's say a Fox News, if I may, right? That's a little micro instance of disinformation and just stirring the pot and making us more ignorant and stupid. And the whole thing on anti-science thing, that's another little snippet of that, right? In society. It's just, and it's shocking. We seem right now, boys, to be walking sort of hand in hand with this anti-science and a pro-reestablished religion thing going on right now. And both of those two things are just most people's nightmares who, don't claim a certain religion and who are baffled and bewildered at people who have somehow turned their back on science. It's just, it's like this perfect storm of stupidity and ignorance, and society's going to pay the price at some point in time. How do you reel that stuff back in when there's nothing slowing down that little micro example there, Locke, that you shared of disinformation? And there are things that are exponentially larger than that, feeding it nonstop. How do you reel that back in so that we become a mentally well and healthy society again? This is like this Pandora's box that's opened up, boys. And with AI coming now, fellas, I don't know if you guys have seen that there was a video released to Paul Maurice after game 2 there, that somebody created an AI thing, and he's saying how they're going to go after Leon and McDavid coming up, but it was all AI. But you would never in a million years know. So
it was awesome. Did you see it? I was like, holy shit, Paul Maurice is going off. And Paul Maurice is that guy that can go off. You talk about disinformation feeding into a real life situation. You're like, that doesn't sound like something Paul Maurice wouldn't say in a fit of rage, right?
I bought it too, Dean.
Yeah.
I actually retweeted it and then read replies, and it was like, oh my God, this is AI.
Because you got suckered?
Pomo was here. And 100%, he's capable of saying stuff like that. Yeah. So I thought, that is awesome. But it's just, I can't. And then I read a little bit, and I'm like, holy cow, they got me, man. And I actually retweeted that they got me, or reposted that they got me. But this
the
whole
McDavid
thing
ones
AI,
are funny too.
The whole thing coming in with AI now, boys, and we are at the seedling stage of that. When that enters the global sphere of things politically related, and God only knows how individuals or entities such as the Russian disinformation machine, what are they planning to do with AI upcoming for elections, things of that nature, with people saying things. And I said, I posted it with that Pomo thing, boys, there will be, even though it was being shared a lot that it was AI, I guarantee you 25% of the people out there still think that actually was real, right? And on social media, being able to post something like that, and it wasn't taken down, there was no warnings about it, anything like that. How is that good and healthy for us as a society if things like that can exist and it just infiltrates like it's the whole Kellyanne McConway saying alternative facts. Like we live in this bizarre state right now in the world around us that it's hard to know what's real or not.
But do you think so? Okay, let me kind of first person this for you, Troy. So you're a big fan of personal responsibility. You're a big fan of educating yourself, education, community, people living in harmony, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? And you're well read. You're an educated individual, and you do your best to kind of get the information that you think is accountable for society out. So. You're talking about how do you put the genie in back in the bottle, and I agree. I don't think you can, but B, is there like some kind of personal responsibility in your head where you're thinking, man, you look at someone who and you obviously know a guy like Theo Fleury, or other people in the industry that have big followings. You're an influencer as well. You've got a big following. Is there ever an opportunity to talk with guys like Theo who carry that big conspiracy stick around and go, the 5G microchips, pedophiles, Putin's the best? Like, do you not feel like, oh, okay, like maybe we should start like, remember Athletes in Action, only not athletes in action, athletes for like intellect, that kind of stuff. Do you ever think that maybe there's a responsibility there for you to go and talk to guys like that, or no?
I haven't really considered that before, but I have seen certain forums on Twitter, and that's the only social media platform I'm on.
Yeah.
But I have seen platforms where you get a diverse group sharing a conversation of, there might be 20, 40 people involved and some interesting personalities that are on both sides of things, and they're having a conversation. Certainly, I guess that's the way to go, boys. But like what I was saying earlier, I wonder and think of the machinery of that to somehow, how do we, even from that point though, go to a place where we're still dealing in a certain level of reality of what exactly is real or not real, what's allowed to be said or not said. I know those are the early stages of that, but I feel like there should be something within the society in which we live that is able to come to the forefront. Like, whenever I present the fact that social media should be regulated, people are always right away, they say, well, who's going to do that? Who's going to carry that out? And everyone's worried about their personal freedoms being eradicated if something like that happens. And I'd be concerned of that as well. But surely there's got to be something that can be put into place to regulate social media in a general sense, to at least somehow protect facts and truth and like it exists with broadcasting, right? In certain ways, it's there's some form of like some body to work from that we can strive to that. But I would think across the board, whether you believe in conspiracy theories, if they think those are true and whatever, right? These two groups that exist, we all should want facts and real things to be available out there and other things to be shunned or not allowed. I would think even if we had,
like, everybody should want a baseline of truth is what you're saying. Like everybody on this planet should want to know what the actual fact, it's interesting because we don't. There's a study out there that I can't remember where it was, is that I think it was something like 60% of people surveyed wanted unbiased information. 40 did not. They wanted something called affirmation, not information. So people Google, it was according, no shit, and I'm not even kidding you. When we grew up, we're like, okay, where's the baseline of truth, right? Okay, well, if you got caught lying, then you'd go, okay, measure that against that baseline of truth. But we live in that post-truth society where people are like, hey, listen, we call those, as you pointed out, alternative facts, and they work for us, and it is our truth. And perception is reality for people, right? So it's literally in the last, since 2015, since Donald Trump, he's really started this, MAGA has started this, is that post-truth society where the lie is your truth and you can stand by it, and anybody who tells you that lie is no good is what they call, and you see this all the time, and I laugh at it, Lachlan and I laugh at it, you're oppressing my point of view. You're my oppressor. This is my truth. I'm allowed to believe this. And you're like, no, dude, science doesn't, you got to hold it up against science. You got to hold it up against case studies and peer-reviewed studies, whether it's, the earth is flat or vaccines are good for you. And they're like, No, because I've read something else that says that is not the case. And that's why people will Google that way. They'll Google to have their information affirmed. They're not Googling things to have a baseline of fact, go, okay, I was wrong about this. Let's go from there. Because we're so weak, Troy. Like we're weak. Nobody can hear you're wrong. And there are so many people, I think, and I'd love both of your thoughts on this. There are so many people that are pot committed. If you play poker, you understand that. They've got all their reputational chips, all their relationship chips in one thing. They've literally walked away from family members because of their belief system and core beliefs and how they've been radicalized. So if they're wrong, Troy, the next step for them is literally death. Like they do not want to be associated with being wrong because they're like, hey, I'm taking a flyer. There's so many people that believe this. Donald Trump believes it. Pierre Poilievre believes it. These groups believe it. My core beliefs align with them. They're literally creating their own universe of truth and this acceptable reality for that group of people, that it exists in this vacuum in a way where we're all standing around, guys like you and I, going, wait a second, we're in our 50s. We understand our baseline of truth. Lachlan and I talk about this all the time, how you shake your head and laugh at these Trumpers, like the video that you saw where you're like, is the earth flat? And they spew this shit, which used to just be a comedy act on late night TV. These people are conducting seminars about what they know.
It's not funny anymore.
No.
Yeah, I agree. It's not funny. It's dangerous and worrisome, right?
Yeah.
There's far too much of it for it to be funny. And we're seeing the results of things. Like, it's not funny at all to me. And I was watching there's an interview yesterday with one of the congressmen who was in the MAGA camp, and he said something. It was fact checked right away and rebutted. And then he said another thing which was fact checked and rebutted right away. And all he did was grin. He was like grinning about being fact checked, and then that whole interview shut down. I don't know. And this is the big question to me, boys, about doing something with social media and the information that is out there on the entire planet. And, people are always talking global this, globalist, that stuff of that nature. But you do see some countries who seem to manage it better than others. And like some countries are more involved, right, with it. And I don't know who the consensus, how we can with society choose or determine. It would probably sit with elected officials to some point. That'll make a lot of people uneasy, but something needs to be done. On X, when somebody puts something out there that's horseshit, all that comes is a community note with it. So you still read the horseshit, and then underneath it, you see it's not correct, it's not right, but they leave it on there. And I don't understand. Someone could do that 5 times, and all they do is have the community notes. For a start on X, I would like to, if you say something that's not true, have the community notes, get a warning about it. If you post another thing that's bullshit, then maybe get suspended for 6 months on the platform. We all know Elon wouldn't do that, but having some like similar to hockey and carrying out infractions that are unacceptable, you could have the same sort of thing on social media, where if you post something that is blatantly not true, you get suspended for some period of time, with large suspensions going forward. But ultimately, boys, something needs to regulate and take back some of what is out there right now. And another scary thing about that would be is that you have the machinery. And I was speaking to somebody in a real interesting, I can't remember the term that he used to describe his job, but he worked for an IT company, and they basically hunt down things that are improper going around for other companies when they're being infiltrated and things like that. And he said the vast majority of what's happening to companies in that realm is coming out of Russia. Like you have enemies of democracy, inherent enemies of the States, the way it exists right now in Canada, in a global scale, wanting to cause trouble and disturbance, utilizing these tools. Nothing's regulating it from that end. So it's like goodness only knows the amount of energy and effort that's going to it from that standpoint. But it's pretty ominous, isn't it? Like whatever the end point is, boys, I don't know what the end point is, but we have got to try and figure out something as a society to put some reins on it, because it's traveling in a direction. I have a 16-year-old son, and sometimes it's hard to, and all of us boys, we lived in a time frame that there were no real major wars that any of us had to go take part of.
Right.
The globe, like ever from Vietnam on. I know that there were plenty of wars out there, but there was never this massive thing like World War II or things of that nature. We live in a time right now that it's really hard to envision. Think of the last 10 years. Think of 2014 and how different the world is right now with all the chaos going on. Where in the hell are things going to be in 2034? It gets really hard to imagine that it's somehow being better, or we're living in a more healthy society. It looks like it's just going to continue to get exponentially more chaotic going forward, and none of us should want that.
Yeah, I kind of live in a world, Troy, where, and you've touched on this, so I know you're self-aware enough to realize that both sides need to take some blame for where we're at. And I think that's a bigger part of the issue, because I wave that flag every once in a while and I get shot down quite a bit.
Well, to be fair, you wave the flag because of the hat. Like you're committed to
yes,
the hat. Yeah.
but I wear the hat for humor more than anything. So here's my issue with regulation. And this is something that I think needs to be explored if we are going to make our way back to, whatever form of, truth we're looking for. And I said this when Trump got banned from Twitter, X, whatever the hell you want to call it. I have a hard time calling it X. I took issue with it. I think he's an idiot, but I was like, you can't ban him. And listen, everyone's like, he almost started a civil war. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I understand it. But the problem is you're fueling that side because they already believe all the chips are stacked against them. So by making these points, all you're doing is just giving them more fuel for their perversions. Right?
But brother, I got to jump in quick with that, because I feel being passive about that, which America has been far too much, I think, with the whole Trump movement, being passive. And you're looking how slow to act the DOJ was on, like, how did January 6th take 3+ years to actually bring any charges against them? How that phone call to Georgia demanding 11,780 votes, how did that take years? Like, how has he been able? He, as much as he's dismantled the political system in the States, he has decimated the judicial system, right? Yeah. And now they actually have the nerve to say it's a 2-tier justice understanding down there. When that used to mean the wealthy and the poor, now it's the 2 tiers of Trump versus all things not Trump or MAGA. Like, they've really distorted all of that. So I think, Locke, not taking action because we feel it fuels that group of individuals, and I think America did that to
or might piss them off. Like, it might piss them off.
I think that was done. Even within the Republican Party, I think that was done to a grotesque and horrible fault. I think it was a massive error of judgment to not, instead of allowing that to grow into being a massive tree, you could have gone at that when it only had a couple of branches and nipped it in the bud. Now it's this monster, and it's just going to continue to grow and grow and grow. I think it has to be attacked.
Well, and you know what, Troy, I'm not suggesting you're wrong. Because there is definitely two sides to that, and both of them lead to the same path. The other issue I have is, and you've touched on this as well, and again, we don't have to spend much time on this because I do have a hope piece here as well. But I got to tell you, I don't care who you put in office. I don't trust any of those bastards. None of them. And I especially don't trust them to regulate the things that, and that's my conservative values. You and I are on the same page. Less government. And listen, I know we're in a point where it's like Armageddon on social media and everybody's trying to figure out what we do moving forward. But I think the solution isn't these grandiose plans to regulate the internet or ban people who are spreading misinformation. I think we have to trust the youth. And there is a bit of an analog movement happening, and I see it. Like, I remember when social media first started to become a thing in our business in broadcasting, and there was this massive push to get everybody on it. You're reaching an audience, you got to figure this out. And so we all did. And then 10, 15, 20 years now, there's this movement to end this celebration of people that take the summer off from their Instagram account. Like, we almost celebrate those people now. And so I think there is this movement where people are, it's still a massive part of our lives and always will, but people are unplugging from it because they're realizing how unhealthy it is. And, you know, like, if you meet them, I know some millennial hippies, they have major screen time rules for their kids. They're buying homes outside of the cities. I think there is that gradual movement that I think will help. It's just going to take forever. So, because that's the slow path back. And again, I know, Troy, you want, because of how angry is not the word, but how concerned you are about where we're at as a society. You're looking for like these instant solutions. Unfortunately, I don't think they're there.
No, I don't think so either. I don't think it's instant, brother. And I don't mind describing myself as angry. I am angry and perplexed and deeply concerned. But the one thing I would say to you just quickly on that, because sometimes I think, you know, I'm just Twitter or X, like you're saying, like, just enough of this, done. Like, it's exhausting. Get out of it. But you can leave and ignore those things. And I have a couple of dear friends of mine, like absolute brothers that I love, who are very successful business owners, and they don't pay. They're always like, why do you pay? Why do you care so much about all this stuff? Why are you so connected and follow it? And I can't help it. It's just my spirit and soul is connected to it. And I see, I've always been like someone who cared deeply about social issues, things of that nature, but they both operate. They don't spend 5 minutes a day, anything to do with the news. They don't care about it. They just operate in their own sort of sphere and just deal with their lives and their families. And I think that's awesome. But then you look at a situation like the late 30s, right? Or that and just think, because it's the biggest example we ever had. A lot of people did that in Germany, right? It's not. It doesn't concern me. I'm not gonna care. Look at this. Don't worry. Like, this isn't something. I don't think the movement we're witnessing right now can be slept on. Or you can say, hey, I'm gonna leave social media for the summer and come, because everything that's going on, all the darkness and negativity and all that sort of stuff is spinning at a rate that's hard to even measure. So do we, for our own sake, or do we feel we're doing something positive if we just hit the eject button and parachute back in after a week or a month or a year of not paying attention or being involved? Like, to me, if people will say, you know, all the idiot trolls, and I do not read many replies that come my way on Twitter. I just don't. But sometimes, get out of here, leave us alone. And it would become, if those who cared about the health and well-being of society left a social media platform like X, can you imagine the cesspool that it would become of just hatred and violence and ugliness of the human spirit? Like, the one thing that Donald Trump has done and or represents is he embodies the most ugly parts of us as human beings, it seems to me, right? And those things on something like X right now, man, it's just hideous. Some of the things that are being, and the hatred, like, to the LGBTQ community, and like the whole, like, and things that I thought were solved in our lifetimes, boys, right? Like, back when we were kids, that, you know, using the term gay as a weakness and all that sort of stuff. And like, people so hating the flag, where people just want to be treated with equality and stuff like that. And all the other examples that are out there right now that are, it's just, these are dangerous times, man. And I don't think that we can take a break from it. We need to stay on top of it. And I don't even know if all of us staying on top of it is going to be enough to slow it down or.
Yeah, no, I don't think we need to, I don't think we should take a break from it. I think that the youth and their lack of, like, my kids don't talk about politics, and they share dog videos.
Yep.
Right. And I think that movement is going to push us to better times. I think it's a gradual thing.
Dog
and it's
video
take
movement. You think the dog and the cat videos and kids
cats.
striking out at home plate? Like, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I don't disagree.
And babies laughing. Right. I think, listen, these are things I do, Troy, to calm my crazy mind and my concern about where we're at. Right. And that's kind of what I lean on right now.
So Troy, let me ask you a question, because you pound away at, and you have experience. And if you want to know the way the future looks, you talk to people who lived in the past, right? As a 57-year-old, you've seen the trends. You talked about the Cold War. You and I both grew up in the shadow of World War II, right? Where so did Lachlan, where you heard first-person stories from family members who served in the war, who fought fascism, who saw firsthand, the damage that, post-truth propaganda, religious dictatorial governments could do. As everybody knows, the Nazis were Christians. The Nazis went to church. The Nazis were friends with the Pope. So you're telegraphing what you've seen because you've heard the stories and you've had them told to you. Like you, my grandfather landed on the beaches of Normandy, told me about the slow creep. That's what he talked about it. He would say, it starts years and years in advance, and the next thing you know, you're at work because of the messaging. And you can talk about messaging and narratives that you see coming up from MAGA, the United States. You spent time there, had history there as well. So you're literally taking your experiences, examples, first-person stories. And the way I look at what you do on social media and the way that I do it, and I think the way that Lachlan does it in his own way, is you're trying to share with people, no. Our forefathers told us firsthand stories of this. These are the things you had to watch out for. To your point, anti-Semitism was settled law. We allow Jews to operate freely in this world. Not allowed. They are people. We don't allow them anything. We treat them as human beings. The rise in anti-Semitism that we've seen, people painting swastikas, going after people. My friend Michael Geist is beside himself in Ottawa, and he doesn't talk about these things, and he's ringing the alarm for the same reason. He grew up with Holocaust survivors as parents and grandparents. And then you've got people in a post-truth society telling different stories about how science isn't important. And you go back in history and you realize the first thing the Nazis did, as my parents explained and grandparents, they got rid of all the professors. They got rid of scientists. They got rid of people who could educate and people who could create intellect. We're seeing that happen in the United States. I'm watching those things parroted from my friend David Parker. Intellects and academics, no bueno. This is a country for the people. So when you see that, it's an easy story for you and I to tell. It's informing someone else who isn't party or benefit to that time in history where we had that information, that we were able to go, this is our worldview. Democracy good, communism bad, fascism bad. We learned from those experiences in Germany and Russia. Parents and grandparents with limbs missing saying that's what they fought for so that we could have a peaceful time. And we did grow up in a peaceful time. We grew up with no war. We grew up with the idea of conscription in our minds being bizarre. Well, what are we seeing today? Wars, people being conscripted and sent to war. Like, it's happening. They're having that conversation in Canada right now. Should we talk about a wartime measure, maybe where we come up with a plan to conscript people if indeed we have to defend ourselves or defend democracy in this country?
Mandatory military.
Having said all of those things to lay tracks for the question that I'm going to ask you, how do you see that now manifest itself from the conversations you've had with your parents, from the things that we've learned from your time in the United States, from your interest in studying Donald Trump? How do you see that manifesting itself in a country that you were born in, where these thoughts and these freedoms and the truth that we held so dear, how do you see that creep here in Canada now too, Troy? Because to me, I see it in the politics I rail against, the same politics you rail against, right? And the religion and the orthodoxy that we rail against.
Yeah. So there's always an echo of what's happening in the USA, we know that there will be an echo in Canada. No matter what it is, in what industry, entertainment, sports, politics, whatever it is, we are heavily influenced, almost in a way, as a 51st state of the USA. It's just always like that. And I knew dang well, and I think most of us probably would have known that the whole Trump thing and that sort of thinking would creep into Canada and take part. And we have seen it without any question whatsoever. It's alive and well.
Where do you see it? Where do you see it?
Alberta is reeking of it for sure. And then in the prairies, it would be second to that, right? So Alberta, Saskatchewan, here in Manitoba, I think it's strongest, and Alberta is leading the way for sure. And and there's no question also, right? Like, as a leader, when I've seen like when Polyev and he you can't be as blatant about it in Canada because we are much different from Americans, and you have to be a little bit more gentle in your delivery of it. But there's no question whatsoever, from a disinformation and a lying and a creating some of the same, using the same phrases, sowing the same seeds of discord and
radical gender ideology,
all of that
parental
stuff,
rights,
all of the negative, right? Canada is broken, and all this stuff. It's like a baby brother of what's happening in America, and we could smell that coming from a million miles away. It's here. It's never going to be have the same size and stature of a movement as what is in the States, but it is here for sure. And then, so we're dealing with that level of discontent. I sent a tweet out or a post a couple days ago about, someone needs to do a master's thesis on white boys, beards, pickups, and F Trudeau stickers, right? Like there's a group of really angry people in Canada, and there's a lot right there, and it's like it's nesting in Alberta, I think, the very most right now. So
I think the playbook is definitely being used from the States because obviously the right, and we talked about this
in Alberta, or just generally in Canada?
No, in general in Canada. You're not wrong to highlight Alberta because I mean the state of discontent in Alberta probably runs a little bit deeper. I think if you spent some time here, Troy, like a lot of time, like I do, I think you'd be surprised at how liberal. There is a very loud, a very quiet middle in this entire country that doesn't get highlighted often because the focus of our politics, and again we've touched on this countless times. I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, but and I can't remember what guest we had, but Dean brought a guest on, and I was like, I don't understand why there's no party for me. Like, why am I unrepresented? And the guy said, because he goes, have you ever donated to a political party? And I'm like, God, no, I never would. He goes, bing. So they go after and they platform on extremes. The left and the right do it because crazy people give their money to political parties, right? And again, I think you're right. The playbook is being used. I wonder, this is my question for you. With what I view as, listen, the movement might be growing, but the lack of success is starting to rear its head in the States. I mean, it's a dumpster fire down there, but this Trump thing is running out of runway, in my opinion, just based on what I'm watching. And listen, there are people out there that go, if you don't think Trump's going to win this next election, you're an idiot. But then there's people on the other side of the fence that go, if you think that Trump's going to win, you're an idiot. So who knows how that thing's going to play out. But let's say it plays out in the favor of the Democrats in this next election. And then God help us, Biden hangs on for another 4 years. But let's just say it does. Do you think there'll be a shift in strategy politically in the States? Because I think they're also doing what you said they need to do instead of ignoring it and letting them get away with it because they're worried about upsetting that Trumper down there. And they are going after him now, and they're doing things that are surprising me, like 34 guilty counts, in the New York court. do you think there'll be a bit of a turn on how the right, and maybe the extreme right plays politics in Canada, or are we just it's over and this is what we should get used to until we die?
First of all, in November in America, if Biden wins the election, I don't know what MAGA will have in store to cause disruption, but I think we could take January 6th and times it by 20 or 50. It's going to be a level of disturbance I don't think that we can truly imagine. I don't think that's going to be peaceful whatsoever, and it could be remarkable. Now, I think ultimately what's going to happen is, and I'll use a term that I hesitate to, but I don't know of how better to encapsulate it, is the Republican Party somehow, some way needs to perform an abortion on itself to get rid of Trump and MAGA. If that doesn't happen, true conservatives need to step up and begin a true conservative party, because that has been so distorted, so grossly distorted with the influence of Trump and MAGA, that it's no longer a conservative party. It's not. It's not.
More and more conservatives are speaking out in the Republican Party.
Finally, but way too late, right? Way too late.
Yeah.
Now, when we come back to Canada, right? I think Canada, there's this large circle. It's not I think a Venn diagram only has 2 circles, right? But I see sort of 3 circles here in Canada, where we have this large circle in the middle, which is the majority of Canadians. And then to the far right of that, you would have a small circle that would be far right, that would be blended in there a little bit. And then on the left, a little circle, the far left. I don't know what the number is, boys. 80, maybe 90% of us, I think, fit in this large circle that agree on a lot of things, and we are comfortable enough in what we agree on or don't or disagree on to have conversations and come to some sort of understanding through negotiation of moving forward, even though we have some differences still. And then in this country, like I'm very conservative economically and judiciously, and in a place of society and things like social issues, I'm fairly liberal, but I'm not far left, right? Like I do not, if I have a kid in kindergarten or grade 1, I don't want a drag queen going to school and reading to my kids, as an example, right? I want to be able to deal with those types of issues and subjects with my child when my child brings it up to me naturally, or something happens around us and we could talk about it. And we have 4 kids. We had those conversations with our kids. But the school shouldn't do something that causes that conversation, in my opinion. And nor do I think, right, on a couple of the far left things, the whole transgender thing, which has become this massive part of things with a very small percentage of kids. But I don't know the proper age that a kid should be able to have surgery to become the other gender. I don't know what that is. I do know as a parent, when my kid was 16 asking for a tattoo, I was like, I think maybe you should wait a little bit. And if he was 14, 12, or 10, I would be that much more so. I think there's some number. And I've been around and I've helped transgender youth before. And they're beautiful young beings that, and some, like a pansexual is not sure of their gender, right? And then there's others that as born as boy or girls that really feel they're the other gender. And they're beautiful young human beings that are trying to find themselves still. But to have that surgery, that so many, it's such a hot button topic. No. I don't know where that is. Is it when they're 18? Is it when they're 16? If you have a child that cries themselves to sleep at night, every night, can it maybe be 12? I don't think so. But I
don't think they allow the surgeries for the youth anyway.
They don't. But it's a huge issue, is what I'm saying, right?
It is. It is a huge issue. I think the drug thing is a bigger question. Like, when do you allow the?
Yeah. So that whole issue, though, I'm saying. That what I'm saying, boys, is that ideally the Liberal Party should represent that big circle, shouldn't they? Or for the most part, and even the Conservative Party should be a big chunk of that big circle. I wish that, here's the bottom line, what I wish, boys. I wish the far left, I wish the leaning left would get rid of the far left politically, right? And hey, they will want to start like little tiny parties, do that. And I wish the far right would get rid of the far right. Or sorry, I wish the right-leaning parties would get rid of the far right. Like I wish the Conservative Party get rid of all those far right wackos.
Yeah.
The NDP and the Liberal parties get rid of the far left that very few people agree with, because it clouds so much. Like I just wish, I know that Canadians, I know for sure that we are in that circle together that embodies and encompasses most of the same beliefs and understandings. And if they're not the same, they're close enough that we can have discussions. And it just seems like both those far ends of the spectrum are doing everything to cause as much trouble as possible
100%.
to the middle circle, causing confusion and arguments. And like, I know when I'm on social media, boys, that I'm a far left wacko.
Yeah.
Because, right, which is just ridiculous. But the far right are calling me that, and, using all the, calling me a pedophile and horrible things like this. Like, there's just this larger group of us as Canadians. We need to somehow work our way back to that to function as a healthy society.
God bless you for saying it, because what was true yesterday isn't true today. We've stayed away from the trans issue for a long time. Troy Westwood, former CFLer, record holder, just all around good human being, joins us to talk about a little nuance, right? And that's what we're talking about, how a lie can become the truth. Extremism can misrepresent the whole, which you're talking about. And I had a conversation with someone this week about the trans issue. And it's not something we talk about on a general level. And they said to me, and it's because I'm starting to get sewered for not having an opinion on things, like when that's now the new thing, right? Like where people can go, hey, Troy, you haven't said anything about Gaza. Hey, Dean, you haven't said anything about trans people. Fuck you. And you're like, what are you talking about? I just got home from grocery shopping and I have time to weigh in on that. Like, give me a fucking break, right? So we're in this like kind of weird vacuum now where you can get in trouble for things you don't say, things in trouble for the things you do say. The trans thing I find interesting, right? Because the conversation I had with someone the other day was they're like, why aren't you talking about the trans issue and standing up? I said, I have, and it's none of my fucking business. And here's the other thing. I, as someone who is absolutely accepting of anybody's sexuality and don't care what they do, I'm also a person who doesn't think they should take their sexuality and figure out a way to beat the shit out of me with it. Come after me because I'm not talking about your sexuality. And what people don't realize anymore is when you're like, well, if you're aligning with anything to do with the right, like if you have your perspective, they're going to call you a pedophile for saying, I would like the opportunity to bring up what a cross-dresser is or what a trans man or woman is with my daughter when they ask me that question naturally, right? And so the political institutions will take a kid's sexuality. This is how you know the political institutions and the extremes on either end are fucking corrupt and don't give a shit. Is that we've been arguing about children's sexuality and figuring out a way to destroy each other's reputations with children's sexuality for the past 5 to 10 years, right? And not just children's sexuality, people's sexuality. Businesses and corporations have figured out a way to make money with these rainbow flags and to use those rainbow flags as a business vertical. Nobody talks about that. Have an issue with a rainbow flag? That's your business. I happen to think you're a weak-minded individual, but that's my opinion. And you voice your opinion on what's going on with the trans community or kids getting sex changes or body modification, and you are instantly dragged out and told that you don't get it and told that you are not important to progress or society. And that is an exclusively extreme left perspective, right? That comes from the left. It's like, hey, yeah, you talk to somebody who read a book about Hitler. There, you've got a Nazi at your dinner party. You're a Nazi. I'm no longer going to believe anything you say. I'm going to tell everybody, all of your clients, that you're a Nazi, all of your clients that you're anti-trans. Like, this is literally how it goes when they weaponize sexuality, and they do it on the left. On the right, it's the same, but in reverse, right? So there's almost like, you talk about that Venn diagram of people in the middle. How do those people in the middle combat that? And my opinion is, stop giving a shit. But I don't think you can stop giving a shit when you make money in content or when you're an influencer in this space. And it's like, we've never been in this position because we don't have that baseline of truth, right? Where people are not being honest about the reasons and the things that they advocate for and against, because the only goal is to radicalize the extremes on either end of that thing and get them to change the opinion of that mass big bubble of 90% in the middle. Like, that's the only goal that exists. It doesn't exist anywhere else. And we sit here and we're told who the fucking problem is. People on the right will say it's the people on the left. People on the left say it's people on the right. But it's literally these political institutions and religious institutions and media institutions who are doing this to you and me. It's not like it's
but
not
that's where
just
you
Donald
with
Trump.
a microphone, Dean, like that's where you guys and your podcast and having a microphone, that's where when you were talking about influencing general thought and stuff of that nature, Locke, before, right? This is where you guys and an individual like Charles Adler back in the day with national programs, this is where media, this whole issue that you're talking about here, Dean, when you have a good, strong, healthy media, that to me is the role of the media when you're talking about political and social issues and things of that nature, where that's where we can lean on the media, and whether that media is leaning left or leaning right, just to bring some level of balance to what we were talking about there, which is going to be fit in that large circle of us as Canadians, right? There are some media platforms that are far left. There are some media platforms that are far right, but there's most of them are in that middle portion that can have healthy opinions of be it economic issues or social issues, that even though I might not agree that something should happen at 16 with something related to the transgender issue, but I might be okay, I might be understanding of it if at 18 or whatever, right? Like just some gray area that can help us to find a healthier society. So I think voices such as what you guys have going on, and having the conversation, right, and trying to just get a tiny little piece. If someone's way out there, can you? And we all probably at this point have friends or family of whatever direction that someone's way out there. Can you plant the seeds of saying something or having a debate or argument about one single issue just to get them back in that big circle somewhere, somehow, right? That's kind of what we're trying to do. And maybe what Locke was talking on about, doing things, relying on the youth, relying on conversation, debate, things of that nature to try and get people back a little bit from these remarkable extremes that exist.
Yeah, I think the issue too, and is for me that my frustration isn't about the fact that the two sides aren't talking and this middle is it's more about the middle not being represented. That's what drives me crazy and keeps me up at night.
But aren't most of us the same though, Locke? Like you, me,
no,
Troy,
I agree. I agree, but it's that choice. Yeah. It's that choice politically that we don't have, because I don't see a choice coming up in this next election for me anyway. Because I look at the hat, but yeah, I'm terrified about the prospect of the other guy getting in, and both sides are gambling, and they both strategically are gambling on getting the middle to vote for them with their extreme ideology. And unfortunately, I'm watching it and I'm looking at it, and maybe this is the influence of the West. I'm worried that the right might be winning because they're basing all of their strategies, not all of them, but a majority of them, on money and the pocketbook. And that's a real thing in Canada right now, where people are concerned about their day-to-day lives because it's getting harder and harder to live. And the conservatives are using that playbook very well.
I wish the conservatives, and like either side, either right and or left. So I wish the conservatives would perform surgery and cut out some of that far right that is unacceptable to those that are in the middle, but those that lean right. Like, I think a lot of Canadians right now lean right for plenty of issues, but the crazy of the far right is like, I don't want that attached to me at all. And I wish our political leaders, kind of what you're saying there, Locke, would speak out about the far right and the far left and get rid of that population within the circles and let them exist somewhere that they can exist in their smaller groups, but not associated with our political parties, maybe. And like Locke, like I would be way more open to things from a conservative understanding in Canada if they would perform surgery on the far right. And I think a lot of people would be much more open-minded to things that are a little bit left. I know for sure they would be if they perform surgery on some of the far right things that they allow into the circle. Like, let those things exist at the far ends of the spectrum alone and outside on their own.
Disown them.
Disown them. And I think if the Conservative Party did that, that circle of the Conservative Party would move a little bit more to the middle, but would get much larger. Like it would be subtract.
It seems common sense to me. Like it does. It seems like common sense.
Dude, you touched on why they won't. You touched on why they won't. Only crazy people give politicians money. Only stupid people will do that. Like, Troy, have you ever given a politician thousands of your dollars just because you're like, yeah, I'd like those guys to win? No. You know why? Because you can put a fucking sentence together and you can exercise critical thought and you're not run by your feelings. You use your thinking brain. You're one of those people, right? There are a large group of people, and I go back to this all the time. And if you watch the last episode of Shoresy where they're playing the Brooks Battlemen, I don't know if you watch Shoresy. It's one of the greatest shows on television. It's incredible. And they literally profiled the two best players from the Alberta team in the men's senior league. And they're like, man, these guys are so dumb. And it was like this little microcosm of like political theater in just this little community. And I'm like, we need to see more of that. You need to see more of like, okay, let's start saying the quiet parts out loud. And the Alberta thing, calling the two guys dumb because they're from Alberta and they're farmers, but like literally is a problem that we have in society. We have dumb people that are being told that they're allowed to talk, being told that their perspective is great because those dumb people are aligning with a certain perspective that runs their life, and they're willing to give all kinds of people their money and time. Dude, you've got people willing to sleep in ditches at the border over a tax rebate that they get back because they're like, I can't put two and two together, but this sure sounds bad. Like, we literally have a dumb person problem in this country.
Tax
and I've
the
said
tax,
this for
baby.
days,
Tax.
And years and years. But those are the people that are unfortunately the loudest. Same thing with on the left. You got people beating the shit out of each other with like megaphones going, we're going to have this trans book reading, whether you like it or not. And to prove their point, they're punching people that have an issue with it. They're hitting people over inclusivity. They're hurting each other over those things. So to your point, Troy, you disown both of those polls. You do a little fucking surgery on your party. And now we're talking about a country that's trying to protect democracy as opposed to steal it, right? That's what we're talking about here.
I love that. And, ideally, boys, that's what I would like to see is to perform surgery, get rid of the extremes of both ends, cut that out of the mainstream political arena.
Yeah.
And then we can get back to being a healthy society. And, the dollars being attached to it, Dean and Locke, I don't understand or whatever needs to happen there. But I wish that there would be a long-term vision with the parties involved that could look at it and understand that if they were to sever the extreme, that ultimately their numbers would increase and allow them a much better opportunity to go be in power, right? There would be addition by subtraction, get rid of the extreme garbage and poison, and your circle of support is going to grow because those that are on the outside looking in from the left on whichever direction that you're looking, and you're going to bring more people into your circle because you have made a statement and made it clear that those extremists on whichever side you do not accept in your partner and are not associating with. I think that would be one of the first steps that could happen from a political standpoint within Canada and the political arena, to maybe one of the first steps to making us a little bit more healthy as a society.
A lot of pundits point to how money is raised and the loopholes that the both sides, all political parties have managed to create, especially in the States. It's way more intricate in the States, but in Canada, there is also versions of it, putting more regulations on how campaigns are financed. And if you did that, it might actually change how people try to campaign, not only in the United States, but also here in Canada. And that might be a fix. That might be the circumcision that you're talking about, on both sides from the extremist point of view.
Thank you for bringing that one up. before I let you go, Troy, just one more piece of business to get to. Lachlan, prior to you coming on the show, has told me that he is solely responsible for your success as a broadcaster over the past 20 years.
I didn't say that. I said I said when we had him on.
Oh, you said something
I
like,
remember.
if it
I
wasn't
said I
for
think
me,
I might have spurred him on to get started in the business, because as soon as we had him on, I'm like, this guy, he needs to be on the radio. And I remember having a conversation with you, Troy, in the early 2000s about having a regular slot on Power. And I don't know what you did with that, but yeah.
Yeah, I've always loved the medium of radio. I love, sitting in a room, whether you're by yourself or with a couple of friends, and I just really dig the medium. And so I was really fortunate. I used to guest appear on a country station 104 here in Winnipeg during the Bombers too, and they actually offered me a full-time position in the morning show once football was done. I did that for 3 years, and then TSN started the sports radio station in Winnipeg, and I got super lucky and was invited to co-host the morning show on that. And we did that for 10 years, and it was stupid. Like, first of all, to get paid to play football for 18 years is stupid. And then to get paid for 10 years to sit in a room with a couple of buddies and talk about sports. Are you kidding me? And that was way better than football. And what I really, really enjoyed about that experience, boys, is that as a pro athlete, or a semi-pro athlete, if you want to call CFLers that, but in that way, people don't get to know you, right? They see you, and you're defined as an athlete. They don't have any idea about your personality or really know you, but they sure, like, they love or hate you. But when you're on the radio and you're talking about your family and your thoughts and how this and that, and there were plenty of really interesting social issues that popped up during that time in sports, Kaepernick, et cetera, that we would take deep dives into. It was really cool. The most common thing that was said to me during that time when I was with TSN in Winnipeg was, I used to hate you as a player, but I really like you now. Because I got to know you, right? Like, you really, how much of your personal life and your family and your understandings and perspectives that you share in the medium of radio. I've always loved radio. And I know, like, boys, like, growing up with someone, and I know, Dean, that you're seem to be buddies with him, but like a guy like Charles Adler, and listening to him evenings in Winnipeg, and, and he was always someone that came from the right, but had a fair, honest sort of perspective and a good, decent perspective on things. I just used to love listening to him share his thoughts and break things down and stuff like that. So yeah, both big fans of both you guys for years and years. And media in general, I just have always grown up, whether it's print, radio, television, whatever it is, media plays, I think, a very important role in society if done the proper and right way. And man, I hope to hear that there's more of that. The best hopefully is yet to come, boys.
What do you make of all the contraction? Obviously, TSM was one of the radio stations that Bell shut down on that fateful day. Was it 3-4 years ago? Maybe 4 years ago? Is that mistaken? What do you make of the contraction in the industry? It's something Lachlan and I talk about quite a bit. He was recently downsized in radio as well, and the rise of people that are doing their own content.
Yeah, and so there's another interesting thing, right? Locke touched on the youth maybe interpreting, seeing things that are maybe lost of folks from our generation, as far as the new, like it's a new game right now from a informational standpoint, and maybe the youth can do something to make it, put a spin on it in a positive way. The whole thing with contraction and that now giving birth to individuals with their own podcasts, with no restrictions of whatever happens in those meetings after shows and things like of that nature. It's unfortunate because of the protection, and you're with a company like whatever it might be that you're unionized and that sort of thing. It's the structure is very different, and it's trying to monetize that so you can feed your family is probably a challenge for a lot of folks that are doing that. But I know, like in Winnipeg, Andrew Hustler Patterson shot off right away into his own podcast with sports stuff in Winnipeg, and seems to be doing okay. So it's interesting, a dynamic, changing industry, unquestionably, but I don't think it's any weaker or any less impactful in that way. It's just a changing landscape.
Yeah, and I think thank you for saying that, because that aligns with my thoughts on it as well. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that we've made is we've neutered people's abilities to have an opinion. There is a lot less people on the radio with that contraction that have the courage to express their actual voice, their true authentic selves. And that's my biggest concern, listening and consuming, anything mainstream. If you want to put a title on it, again, I can listen to a morning show with 2-3 people on it, and I can tell you in 30 seconds whether they like each other. I can also listen to, a radio and tell you if that person is being truthful with not only himself or herself, but the audience. And there is a serious lack of that in our industry right now. And I'll include podcasting in it, because I think a lot of people that get downsized and moved into this space are very worried about that next opportunity, and that's in their head before they're opening their mouths. And that's a problem today, because we don't value authenticity in this space, podcasting, as much as we should. I think there needs to be that movement in broadcasting as a whole. Allow people to have a voice, say what's on their mind without the risk of them being downsized or persecuted for it. And that just doesn't exist right now. That does not exist.
I think an individual needs to be willing to accept the possibility of being shut down or things negative. The individuals involved need to have the audacity and courage to speak their mind and their heart and soul. And hey, man, if you're the purity of that is, if someone steps up like that and delivers that, you're either accepted or rejected by society. And if you are accepted and get the ears and the brains and the souls connected with you, then you're looking at, you can really make a positive, impactful change. And I would hope and pray that there are still those amongst us that are willing to take those sort of courageous steps and go out and put it on the line like that. And like I do that on social media, as tiny of a voice that I have, right? Like
you're one of those voices, Troy.
Just allow us to do that. And to, I think if we are good, decent human beings, our thoughts and our reflections of our spirit and soul is going to embody that. And the vast majority of individuals out there that align with that or are drawn to that are going to support that. And to hell with the naysayers and anyone that tries to cancel us or say something stupid. Like, for me, the best way to manage that, Locke, you're talking about, like any sort of negative influence or impact, just ignore that. It's like, and you have to do that in pro sports, right? People have opinions, and it's like, be a duck, let that roll off you, or be Teflon and let it bounce off you, and just continue to move forward, trying to inspire and help folks to either think a certain way or just inspire them to think and debate, and we can all grow together and move forward as a society. But approaching it in a healthy, growthful way for all of us. Like, let's not be fearful of failure or rejection or being, anything sort of negative happening there. Let's just take it head on and move forward and try and make our world better. Please.
Do you find that it's like,
thanks for
but that's
that,
like, yeah, I appreciate that resilience. I don't know what it is. It kind of feeds into, the failure of that industry, but it also feeds into the things that we're talking about societally is, you've got a lot of people that are not familiar with that word, right? Resilience or failure or getting up and moving on. And, you're encouraged not to. There's a lot of quitters. We see quitting quite a bit in our society. We see quitting in the industry. We see demoralization in that industry, demoralization in society. And what you said is really important. And I appreciate Locke saying, yeah, thank you for saying that, is we're encouraged to not share the best of ourselves now because everybody's afraid to do it, right? Because you've been beat down, or you've been told to shut up, or you've been called a pedophile on Twitter because you're like, hey, racism's bad. Shut up, pedophile. I get that quite a bit. And it's that attitude of being unafraid. But I feel like we live in a very afraid world. now. Like when I grew up, we didn't. We lived in a world where you're told to go and explore, speak your mind, say your piece, da 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 da. But now there are so many penalties for doing that. Like you go back to your industry. I don't know a radio guy that isn't working scared. I don't know a content provider that isn't working scared. Like literally, if you're creating content now or putting out the best of yourself, you're working scared because you're afraid because you can't predict where that hatred's going to come from these days, Troy. Right. And I think that's also part of the problem. And so, it's not great for resilience. Like we got a lot of people who are like, forget it. Like, why would I subject myself to that? To your point, a lot of people seem to think that they still have a duty to be able to inform people, a duty to communicate with their community, and a duty to be a better individual and telegraph that a better individual to people. We just don't.
Brother, there's an old sports quote that I leaned on for sports, and that I think you can apply to what you're saying, and that is, do not consume yourself with thoughts of results. Consume yourself with your procedure and break it down like that. So I would hope and think, Dean, that media and things of this nature should be approached in that sort of a manner where, teach ourselves, if you don't already feel that way, teach yourself to be fearless and to move forward, not to worry about the results of what you're doing, but consume your mind with thoughts of procedure and preparation, and just be yourself, man. Right. And if you're, and teach our circles around us, those in our circles, certainly our kids, to think in that same sort of way. Be fearless, be bold, be true to yourself, express your thoughts and your opinions. And hopefully those that are expressing themselves in that way are being real and are good and decent. And I don't think we're going to go wrong as a society if there's more of that. If we're expressing ourselves you can be cutting edge and be respectful and have good, solid conversations from that and come to a better understanding of one another. And we see examples of how that would benefit and help all across the board. I think a lot of the hatred and distrust that exists in society right now from the opposite ends of the spectrum, like we were touching on earlier in the show, if there could be some conversations, some forms to bring together those opposing ways of thinking, and maybe having something in the middle to mediate that, almost as a spirit guide in a sort of a way, that would help to make our society more healthy. But for anybody out there who's got a microphone or a keyboard or whatever it is, just do not hesitate to be bold. Please be bold, because we need to combat a lot of the planned almost evil or negative sort of things that are going on out there and that are being employed to cause disruption and to cause trouble. We need that sort of force of good with good intentions to be combating that other side there more than ever right now. And I think those of us in that mindset that want to be, not only live a healthy individual life, but exist within a healthy society, this is no time to wilt. No time for silence. If we choose to be silent, that old saying, then we are truly complicit in the things going on around us that are unacceptable or wrong. So please be vocal and voice yourself.
You're suggesting there is a right and a wrong, Troy?
Yeah. And there's grays within that, right? Like there's spectrums within that, but certainly just from almost a DNA standpoint or a very base fundamental standpoint, like we were talking about, that large circle of Canadians that exist, the 80-90+% that exist in that middle portion, I think we're all connected by that level of goodness and decency. I certainly hope, anyway, from a humanitarian standpoint. And at times it's hard to have that belief, right? Or it's like, I don't know if is it 50-50 good and evil right now, or good and bad? I don't know what it is, man. But yeah, it's hard sometimes to not lose faith in humanity from a macro sense, sort of looking down at the world at different times. But yeah, continue, be that voice, man. Be that voice of positive change, of more understanding, more tolerance and acceptance, things of that nature. And do not be fearful of criticism, for sure.
Yeah, and make sure you're right before you decide to be bold. Like it's good advice.
Make sure you're right.
It's good advice for anybody where you're like, it's like those parents that told those kids to go on American Idol who couldn't sing. And they're like, yeah, go, sing your song, go do your thing. And you're like, yeah, be bold, but just make sure you're in the ballpark with your facts and that you're right. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing that I legitimately can't reconcile in my mind are people who are clearly wrong, politicians, leaders, captains of industry, influence, who are clearly wrong, who are clearly lying, something you can debunk in 3 seconds with Google, who you've got an army of people behind them going, yeah, we don't even care if he's wrong.
And wrong and
we
lying,
just like it.
Wrong and lying are two different things, right? Like wrong from a moral standpoint for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, wrong and like the lying and or what I'll call disinformation at this point, it is grotesque right now. And we touched on this a little bit earlier on how to try to reel that in and that sort of thing. But being wrong is okay. Right, being wrong and even getting knocked down to the ground or down to the floor, it's okay, and you get up and learn from it and move forward, right? And I think that we still live in a society that if you have a wrongful act, a wrongful statement, things of that nature, depending on what your approach is and your level of resiliency and things of that nature, you can grow and move forward, and I think it'll be accepted. But purposely spreading disinformation, to me, that's an unforgivable sin. I'm not going to forgive you for a very long time or in an infinite number of positive things and truthful things after that. Like that needs to be arrested for sure amongst us, right? The disinformation bullshit, the being wrong. It's okay to be wrong, man. Be wrong and then get up and get back at it.
You still with Little Hawk? I see you're still on Apple. Your award-winning band, Little Hawk. Are you still doing
it's pretty
music?
cute. I get like a $50 quarterly check from something I don't even know from where or why. And my son teases me about it all the time. But yeah, it's that was a lot of fun. And I look back at the lyrics and I don't know, I would if you're interested in checking it out. That was done while I was playing football, and it really tackles. I was traditionally adopted by a beautiful family in Seguin, a First Nation here in Manitoba, and Anishinaabe family. So a lot of my teachings and understandings and perspectives come from those teachings, those traditional teachings. And the songs that came through me were inspired by a lot of that, and the stories told to me, or being approached by elders or individuals asking to write songs about stuff. But if that stuff would have been, if we lived in today's world, the subjects of my songs, I don't think I would have been welcome to play in the CFL anywhere near as long as I did. Like for whatever reason, back then, before social media and the world that we live in now, they were very much two separate worlds. I had Eagle and Hawk out of the gate, and then solo Little Hawk singing about it. It was pretty heavy duty stuff, and then existed with the Bombers, and the two parts of those two worlds stayed separate for me. I think, thankfully, now I look back at that, and yeah, if you love folk music on steroids sort of thing and tackling some issues, and a lot of the issues that were tackled back then in those songs have been remedied or are in the process of that, yeah, go check it out. It's Little Hawk, and it's on Apple Music.
Yeah, it was aggressively defending Indigenous rights and sovereignty. Right. That was what I got out of that. And I remember when you started winning awards with, was it Eagle Hawk? Is it the name of the band?
Eagle and Hawk and Little Hawk. Yeah. So this is something interesting on X and stuff where, I traditionally adopted into a family.
Yeah.
So that's not a legal adoption or anything like that, but anybody within the community, First Nation.
Explain that. Explain traditional adoption into an Indigenous family.
Yeah. So it's like it's not a paper thing, but it's just a family brings you into their family and accepts you as a part of the family. Right. So I have a Westwood family, and then the Crishane family, Dave and Oriana Crishane of Seguin, traditionally adopted me into their family. So, in a lot of ways, they were also my mom and dad and all my brothers and sisters and cousins and all the relations in that way, hugely impactful to me and truly beautiful. So it's interesting because a lot of folks, I used to, I took part in ceremonies, sun danced and did all those sorts of things, and would had my hair long and braided and stuff like that. And people think that I am First Nation and things like that. So when I speak out against, and one of the things I think is very fortunate is when you're white, you could call out white people. Right? Like that's one of the best things about being white. If you are, I think, a good, decent, grounded white dude when you see white people acting like asses, you could say, hey, that's pretty ridiculous. But the amount of people on social media that think I am First Nation born sort of thing and call me racist because I say this or that against white dudes, or saying, hey, white boys with beards and pickups and F Trudeau stickers, what's going on? Like, why are you guys so angry? Right? It's just sort of interesting, some of the thing there. But, and some folks, you know, that pretend Indian thing gets into the Buffy St. Marie a little bit and all that sort of stuff. But there's no, like, I always introduce myself as traditionally adopted. Kik, Little Hawk is my name, by David Noria Kershana, the Sagging First Nation. And I love that family, the teachings, the traditions. And I dare say, brother, from all of my teachings and being around First Nation elders and that community, I think the world in general would do a whole lot of good to be exposed to the teachings and understandings and perspectives of those indigenous to this land.
Oh, without question. You know, I have never in my life had such a change in paradigm of what I think about, you know, Canada's first people, indigenous people, not Canada's first people. They are owners of this land that we live on. We are squatters. We are colonial squatters. That is what we are. And to understand the history of this country, and then to understand the history of its first people, that predates anything here by 38 to 55,000 years, right? To understand how the communities work together, to understand what was important to them, internal, not external, the gods and being at one with the earth, to understand
the spiritual understandings, to me, is what's most beautiful, for sure. Like,
truly.
they have a different,
it's not monotheistic, it's not evil, it is loving, it is accepting, it is community based, it is healthy, it is natural. And the more that I understand what I've been taught, and so this is conversely, this might be even a whole other fucking podcast, I don't know. But the more I understand what I've been taught from a Christian evangelical perspective, being in that home, and the more I understand what has been wiped out, I can understand why that has been wiped out, because it is so loving and so peaceful and encourages individual thought, perspective, capability, not being reliant on anybody other than your people, and love and peace and being warriors for the right thing, right? That it stands in complete contrast and is literally rides in the face of the things that cause us societal issues today, which is that monotheistic perspective that you need this religion by hook or by crook, because it's the only way that you can rule people. It is the only way for rulers to rule. And that is not what indigenous spirituality ever taught, right? It is
so contrast. Different, brother. Yeah, the whole life perspective, spirituality, it's like the Western world is linear and First Nation spirituality is circular, and it is so profoundly different. It is almost the exact opposite in a lot of ways, like what you're explaining there and stuff like that. And it is beautiful. And I think that as time goes forward, I'm hopeful anyway, that we could come in a larger sense as Canadians, and even globally, come to a better understanding of the beauty and the intelligence of it, and adopt some of those understandings. I think we would be better off as a society for it.
Yeah, I do too. I think we'd be better off society if you ran for prime minister as well. What are the chances? Let's get Troy Westwood in the office.
Hey man, I've thought about the whole political arena and spectrum for many decades. I've been asked to run in a couple different times by a couple different parties, and just wasn't maybe comfortable with the ridings or that sort of thing. I would want to walk into a place where, you know, I could be impactful, stuff like that. But it is something I think about all the time, brother, and we'll see what the future holds. Oh yeah.
Dude, I'm watching Wob Canoe clean up Manitoba.
Yeah.
And in a real, tangible, spiritual way.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
That's
beautiful,
gotta be motivating.
man. Yeah.
Isn't it incredible?
It is incredible. And Wob and I go back a little bit. We've recorded a song. There's a story of Wob and I that could be told for sure. That it's a positive story, but just there's lot of, well, it's a long, I don't know if it would be a long conversation, and it's related to the First Nation communities and the relationships within society as well, with certain, like some people in Manitoba are, you know, Wob had a like a lot of young First Nation kids had a challenging upbringing, right? Where there was a lot of growth for him as a man, for sure. And a lot of people here will still reference things, or not a lot of people, but those that just have it in their heart and soul to hate WAB specifically, or maybe things First Nation, right, with an underlying current of racism, unquestionably, will still call out and say things that he did.
He's got a story, right? He's got this incredible story where he got into trouble as a young man, like a lot of us do, where you're full of yourself, you drink too much, you do some drugs, you get aggressive, you get arrested, you go to jail. And then you got one of two choices as one of those young men. You can decide to learn from it and be a better human being, or you can decide to continue down that path. And Wab Kinu's story, the premier of Manitoba, legitimately chose to become a better person, to your point. Right?
1,000% that is true. And it's a great story. And it's really, truly beautiful what's happening. I think for most of there's a lot of positive things happening in all, whether it's we're talking social issues, economic things in Manitoba. I think they're doing a great job. I think a lot of Manitobans feel that way. And I take a step back and watch it, and it's truly beautiful, man. So much love to Wab and all the individuals involved with him and the party here in Manitoba that are doing such a fantastic job. It's a beautiful thing to watch.
Troy, I'd love to have you back, get a little focused in a podcast and talk a little bit about, maybe even have Wab Kinu back. But dude, I have followed you on Twitter for a long time. Grew up out west, totally aware as a young Riders fan where you and Dave Ridgway, I think Dave Ridgway might have been pre-you, actually. Ken Austin, those days. So for me, growing up in a small town, to have you on this podcast, knowing exactly who you are, knowing you, watching you live your values, unafraid, you're a tremendous motivator for me as a human being, for me as a personality, that people like you exist. I would encourage everybody to follow Troy. At Troy Westwood is where you can find him. Read about this man and get to know him a little bit, because he's trying to speak to people's better angels, and we need more people like you out there. But dude, thank you so much for taking a minute to talk to Lachlan and I. Lachlan had to split. He sent a nice note saying thank you, and he wants to have you back as well. But thanks for doing this, and I wish you nothing but the best, and I would love to have you back another time. Thanks for breaking the ice with this interview today. Thank you.
My pleasure, brother. A big fan of yours as well, and Locks, and much love and respect, bro.
All right. Talk to you soon. Troy Westwood, ladies and gentlemen, 18-year CFL record holder. I love how he called the CFL semi-pro, depending on how you feel. Holds several club records. Most points scored in season, 2,748. Most points scored most in career, season 213. Notable moments. I didn't bring this up. You never want to talk about mullets with guys that used to have them when it's first interview time. You want to just kind of build a relationship and then ask about the old mullet, which is, by the way, making a comeback. Big time making a comeback. Anyway, thanks to Troy and everybody for taking the time to talk about what's going on. That was nice. Don't forget, everything we do, you can find at crier.co. Go to crier.co today for more information, including all the podcasts in the network, like the Staff and Graph podcast with my friend Rachel. You can get all kinds of different podcasts here. It doesn't matter. It could be this one. It could be the Down by Two Sports Betting podcast brought to you by Tony Bet. Check it out, crier.co. That's where everything we have lives. Thanks to our friends and partners for making this possible as well. As always, Muse Massage Spa, celebrating 15 years, MuseMassageSpa.com. Muse on the Mic is the name of their podcast. Patreon is where you can get it totally uncensored. I love these girls. You're going to love them too. Get some sexology in your life. Learn about advocacy. Go to the uncensored version on Patreon. Give them a few bucks. You'll be glad you did. Muse on the Mic, Patreon. Muse on the Mic is on YouTube and anywhere you get your fine podcasts as well. Brought to you by Cantork, makers of rugged, hardworking torque wrenches. Canada's leading industrial tool experts, the best in sales, service, rentals, calibration, maintenance, custom fabrication of industrial torque tools. No matter the scale of your bolting project, these guys have you covered. Heavy machinery, railroad, forestry, steel industry, nuclear industry. If you got a bolt that you can't loosen because they don't make something that can loosen it, that is tough enough for the job and gets the job done, these guys will make it for you. They do it for heavy industry around the world. Experts been doing it for 20 years, manufacturing out of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So make sure you check out cantork.com. Today, brought to you by Fact Check. rugged, hardworking fact checkers. They got scientists, journalists, psychologists coming up with disinformation killing software. The machine is eating right now. It's been eating for months, learning what is and what isn't the truth, learning how to ascertain whether or not the picture you're looking at is real or is it misrepresented. Same with video. We talked about it. Deep fakes are going to be a major issue. And the team at Fact Check is hard at it. They're going to have a beta test, and you can sign up for that beta test ASAP, FAKTCHEK.io. Again, go to factcheck.io, sign up for the beta test today. And you'll thank me for it because you might find yourself becoming a verified fact checker. Isn't that nice? Kill disinformation in its tracks. Go to factcheck.io for more information. Have a great day, everybody. Appreciate you being here. Want to say thank you for your time because we know how important your time is to you because it's just as important, if not more, to us. So thanks for taking time. Don't forget to rate, subscribe anywhere you get your fine podcast. Dean Blundell Show on YouTube, Crier Media on YouTube, or anywhere you get your audio versions of the podcast, Google, Apple, Spotify, etc. Have a great day, everybody. We will see you tomorrow. And it's Friday. I'm going to fucking mail it in on Friday. Yes, we will. Have a great day. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.